the second precept is to abstain of taking what is not given to you freely. And by taking the positive action could be generosity. So love gives itself, meaning love is a donation from one person to another. Or if one prefers it, a rendition. In this case, rendition is the total abandonment of any advantage derived from the way of power. And I mean, this one I like. I mean, it's like, again, whatever. I mean, I do have political opinions, but obviously when you're talking about religion or a philosophy, I don't know, you tell me if I'm wrong. I'm actually curious to know if I'm actually wrong or not. To give a belonging to another person, and because that in itself, it's an expression of love. So it's to abstain from taking not only belongings, but also time and energy from another person against their will. And this one is also parts that I liked of this precept, because even when I started reading it, and also because I was triggered by him, I was just like, okay, abstain from this. But it never occurred to me also the whole time and energy. To be fair, I do think it comes down also with politeness. But I don't know, I guess I just liked it that it was like it was mentioned as in it's not just material possessions that one can take. Anyway, so we take time from people when we impose them to do something when they have work to do, or when we force them to listen a conversation they don't want to listen. And to take energy for another person, it's even worse, because we are forcing them to listen to complaints or pleas for so long that they are in a physical and emotional exhaustion, and sometimes even a nervous breakdown. So if you don't feel grateful, something isn't right, since your attitude is that of taking advantage and just taking without care of the other person. In other words, I guess it can be like you're feeling entitled to the other person's time and energy, and that's why you don't feel the slightest gratitude. Because what he says is that gratitude can only be felt by mature individuals. A real individual feels the gratitude, but also express it. In this precept, he decided to go and be a communist with his statements. So I will be ranting. So what he says is that property isn't distributed in an equitative way, and that for a Buddhist, there is a combination between the way of power and the way of love. Let's stop there, because it's just like, as in, I would agree that Buddhism strives for balance as a whole. But again, it's the first time I hear this of the whole between power and love, because of what he's gonna say next. But and also before going next, is the whole this of properties and distributed equitative. Again, I do think this is a political issue, which no religion should tell you what you should think about political matters. So in Sangharákshita's words, it's in a democratic country, it can be achieved a more equal distribution of property and money through legislation, which in effect means to force an expropriation from the minority to a majority in the biggest scale possible from the principle of generosity or sharing. End of quote. The point is that you take from the rich ones, which are the minority, to give to the majority. This is what he's saying, like about property and the money. And he says it to force an expropriation. And it's just like, as in, first, this is blatant communism. And also that because he just covers himself with the whole, even if you're in a democratic country, and he does that in all the topics I've been ranting, he does that, he just hides kind of like, because Buddhism wants the best for everyone, then we should expropriate the property. Like, No, as in, Buddhism doesn't say that. I mean, as far as I know. And if it does, it's just gonna be like, what the fuck? Because again, as in, this is no balance of power and love. You shouldn't, I mean, this is the proper taking, taking a belonging from someone else by force, to either to yourself or to a bunch of people. Like, you're going against the precept completely. And then, and just to make it worse, he also says that this latter one, which is the quote I just read, is a responsibility for an organization like the Western Buddhist order, which is the order he himself founded. It's just like, why would that be your responsibility? And for me, he's taking this, or he's making this order to make it a cult in order to push communism. And that's why I dislike him so much. I mean, I dislike him for many reasons, but this one being the main one. And I mean, it's just like, why are we discussing politics when it should be Buddhism? You know why? Because he wrote it, he said it. Because I think the last video is when I talked about how people should be smarter when addressing problems. Which isn't to say like to not address a problem, it's just to address it in the most intelligent way, so that one can actually help. And you know what? The 10th precept talks about this. He doesn't follow the precepts. It's what anyway. In other words, this democratic government should do something by force for the poor without giving a flying F about the consequences, even if that ends up in what we can see now in Venezuela, for example, or what happened in Vietnam, or if you have gone to Cuba, like there are very horrible scenarios that can happen if you do what he is suggesting in a Buddhist order. I mean, why is he talking about this? So anyway, this precept is the pillar of gold, because gold is the most precious of metals, and it's used for commercial exchange. And of course he continues triggering me, because he says that gold is unalterable by hot, humidity, and the majority of corrosive agents. Likewise, generosity isn't affected by the conditions in which it works. But guess what? Generosity is affected by the conditions in which it works. As in, if you take generosity as giving, as a donation, still it's under the condition of what is your current position. Are you in a position to actually help another person, or you're not in a position to help another person? And it's not just about money. It can be about giving food or even giving shelter, it's like, or it can extend to animals, like stray dogs, for example. Like, are you in a position to actually bring them, all of them, home and provide them for food, 24/7 care? As in, it's not that simple as just be generous because there are no conditions that could ever limit your generosity. As in, of course there are. This Sangharákshita is doing his best to push his own communist agenda, which is the main thing I very much dislike. What I said is, like, one must have the very least of common sense to think in questions about any specific matter, as in, how are you gonna do that, and how is that gonna affect? You cannot just simply do stuff because you want a certain outcome. You have to think, you have to be smart about it.